Is the show that helps add some perspective to the top stories of the past 7 days. Let me introduce tonight's panel of guests for you tonight. Vivian Waltz is a contributor at Time magazine. Also with us is Alberto Romagnoli, a correspondent for Rai TV. Greg Viscusi is a reporter from Bloomberg News, and our very own Armin Georgian, international affairs editor, is here with us as well. Now, on to our third topic, and he's been accused of having a bad case of foot-in-mouth syndrome. This week, the media delighted in the alleged gaffes of Republican Mitt Romney. Romney's first foreign trip took him to America's closest allies, that's Israel, the UK and Poland. But he was accused of racism after implying that the culture of Arab Palestinians was to blame for their economic hardship. He also upset the British by suggesting they weren't ready to host the Olympic Games. Well, things went slightly smoother in Poland, although Romney's spokesman did tell a group of journalists to kiss a certain part of his body. But what did Americans think of it all? And has Romney managed to set himself apart from the foreign policies of his rival, President Barack Obama? Armin, I'll start with you. Mitt Romney's been accused of seeing the world rather like George W. Bush did, in two parts: friends on one side, enemies on the other.
Well, obviously, it's just trying to get, shore up the hawks in the Republican base. If you've got the social conservatives, the foreign policy hawks, you've got these different segments. And I think the people who are interested in foreign policy obviously were upset that he couldn't make inroads after the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. And so it's about trying to sort of reestablish that idea that the Democrats are not as strong as the Republicans on foreign policy, that they don't look after their allies. They're just, trying to be nice to people who don't like the Americans, like Iran. One interesting aspect of this whole story, though, that I've been following this week is this whole idea of an ethnic vote. Is Romney really rallying? Is he succeeding in doing that in America? And I've noticed that he set up this thing called Polish Americans. He's setting up Polish Americans for Romney, which is going to be chaired by Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, who might become his running mate, who's of Polish ancestry partly. And it's also being chaired by a senator and a House of Reps person, both of Polish ancestry. But it seems a really weird thing, because I think, in America, you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, and you happen to be Polish American or Italian American or Jewish American. And the idea that setting up something like this, or even going to Warsaw, is going to rally a whole bloc that happens to have Polish roots.
Is it a substantial number, though? Is it a number of voters that would make a difference?
Well, if they all voted Republicans, yes, but they don't. I mean, it's the same with American Jews, and I would imagine that the idea of, that he was there, in Jerusalem saying this is the capital of Israel, and particularly the comments you mentioned about the inferiority of Arab culture, that would make liberal American Jews wince, and it's not going to suddenly make them all vote for Romney, because they were never a bloc as a whole. So I find this whole idea of trying to rally whole blocs quite bizarre and possibly misguided on his part.
This was a fundraising trip. I mean, he went to London, he went to Jerusalem to raise money. That was the only thing he was there for, and that he was probably successful at. He got made fun of for some things he said, but I don't think that many Americans noticed, or those, and even among those who noticed, I don't think that many care. The Polish trip was probably less part of fundraising than the Jerusalem and the London legs were. And yes, I mean, there was a Polish vote in some swing states like Ohio and Pennsylvania that does count. It's really more of a Catholic vote than a Polish vote in some cases. But I think this whole trip will be forgotten in a week, probably.
I'm not sure about that, actually. I think where you will see it come back to haunt Romney is in the negative ads, which will start up after American Labor Day, when the real heavy campaigning begins, September, October into the fall, where you'll have, this is perfect material for little clips to appear in ads, which in an election this close, there is always the question of, is it worth throwing out the guy that you already know for somebody that you don't really know in terms of being a president? And if there are doubts that can be
do you think he seemed inexperienced? Is that what the Obama camp will play up on?
I think so. He's inexperienced. He is not a diplomat of the world. I mean, certainly if you think about where America's reputation was under George Bush compared to where it is under Obama, it's been a fairly dramatic turnaround, actually, in the last 5 years, pardon me. And I think for a lot of Americans, it might again raise those issues.
From whose point of view? I mean, the criticism of Obama on the world stage is that his enemies, America's enemies, feel safer and America's friends feel less safe. I mean, is that where Romney's trying to come in? Romney's supporters say that he's very black and white about it. He's like, we will be good to our friends and we will not be good to our enemies, like Russia, who he singled out, of course, as the number one geopolitical foe.
I think the problem is that even with his friends, he made this gaffe in London, and obviously that will be used by the Obama campaign. He can't even say the right things when he's in friendly territory, and he managed to completely outrage the Palestinians, who at some point he's going to have to engage with if he becomes president. And no, I agree with Vivian. I think actually it will be used because at some point in the campaign, once the real campaigning starts, you do get scrutiny about the foreign policy credentials of somebody, and we saw that with John McCain choosing Sarah Palin. Obviously that was the vice president, not the presidential candidate himself, but still it does matter, and it's gonna be used against him, I think, at some point.
Maybe I didn't see one soundbite that you could pull out of what he said on this trip that you could throw into a negative ad. I mean, he said some aspects of the preparations of the Olympics was disconcerting. I mean, that's a word that a lot of Americans don't even know. I'm
glad you're not running for president.
Really rank your compatriots very highly.
I don't think they're going to use the comment from from his spokesman that you very delicately referred to, kissing a part of his anatomy. But that doesn't quite fit into an ad either. So I don't know. I mean, I think that on foreign policy credentials, Obama certainly wins. I think he already was ahead before this trip. He still is ahead, but that's not where the election is going to be won or lost.
Do you think it matters to Americans? I mean, they do.
I mean, Greg's right. Of course, most Americans don't really care about foreign policy. They know very little about foreign policy. They live in a very, very big, powerful country, and they don't think much about the rest of the world.
With a lot of domestic economic concerns right now that trump all of that.
I mean, I would think the main issues of the election, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are the economy, and that really is where the election is going to be won or lost for Obama.
And a good opportunity for him today, following those jobs numbers.
Absolutely, but those job numbers have to keep going up and up and up every month between now and November for him to really feel safe enough going into this election.
And on the economy, who's winning the argument on the economy right now, do you think?
I think a problem is that Obama cannot really claim a great record on the economy. I mean, whether you could argue whether it's his fault or not, but he cannot claim that he's turned the economy around. I think with Romney is that the man is so out of touch with common Americans, and I think that's really where they hammer him on it. I mean, a guy who builds $1 million car elevator in his house, does not understand what it is to be unemployed or your fear of unemployment, and I think that's really
where. Does Obama know about unemployment?
I think
he's a lawyer from.
Yeah, but it's not the gap is not quite a big, and he's the incumbent. I mean, you've got to be more comfortable with the guy who's challenging him than the guy with the incumbent. I think that although Obama is not going to be able to rate his success that highly in the election, he's not going to be able to tout his success that highly. I think they're going to be able to throw enough doubts about Romney's ability to do better, and I think that's going to be the tactic.
And could he possibly be overplaying this, affinity with the working man? I mean, what about Obama's comments
He's not claiming affinity with the working man. He's just claiming that Obama's totally. He's just claiming that Romney's completely out of touch.
But if you own a business, you didn't build that. I mean, he has been accused of stirring up some class warfare.
Yeah, I mean, that was clumsy wording. But if you read, it was totally taken out of context. It was very clumsy wording of him. But he did not say you did not build your business. He said you did not build the infrastructure that made your business possible.
He said the end of the statement was if you own a business, you didn't build that, and that's the one that's been taken. Hasn't
I know
it? Played again
but it's been
and again.
taken very out of context. So you have to read the whole quote.
Well, that's what gaffes are, isn't it? All right, let's move on to our next. It looks like Mitt Romney was certainly wrong about one thing, and that was London's ability to host the Olympic Games. Danny Boyle's £27 million opener won international acclaim. While on the transport front, it's been more ghost town London rather than the gridlock games. Well, doomsayers were predicting that it was all going to be a big nightmare and that everything was going to go wrong and the tickets weren't going to arrive on time. That hasn't been the case 1 week in. And on the medals front, China, as usual, right at the top, while the United States not far behind, thanks partly to the incredible Michael Phelps, who now has no less than 20 medals under his belt. Alberto, what's been the highlight for you of the Olympic Games so far?
Well, it's connected with the economy, I think, because we have these big world companies, big factories, and little specialized companies that make luxury products. I think that the Italian team is a good example. They are not very good in athletics or in swimming, that are the big iron and...
What are they good at, the Italians?
They have females
Fencing.
Very good. Or
Archery, they picked up medals in
kayak.
archery, kayaking, yeah.
Exactly, little sports, niche products, but that they work very well all over the world. That I think it's interesting because it shows that you need talent to do some sports. You need a school because it comes out that all these athletes have very good teachers, tradition. There is a little town, Iesi, in Italy, where they made 30 medals in fencing, just in a little school, because they have good tradition.
So you're hoping for gold in fencing?
Yeah, I think
They've already won a few, the Italians, in fencing. Yeah.
So I think that's a good point. And the thing is that the nations are still there. I was part of this week in holiday in Italy, and I was watching a different Olympics from the Olympics I'm watching at the French TV. Because every country is focusing on its own athletes.
Absolutely.
That you like it or not. This is a big world game, but you watch from your angle. That's
And it's a nice time to be an American, Greg.
Yeah, although the U.S. does as well in the Olympics as
Might not know long words, but you know how to win medals.
No, but the Americans do as well in the Olympics as they ought to do. There's something actually extraordinary about the U.S. performance. I mean, various economists have mapped out how many medals you should win, and it's just simply a function of population and wealth of the country. And the U.S. does exactly as it should according to these models. So,
well, I mean, you get basketball players that are earning $20 million a year playing against Nigeria. I don't know what the Nigerian basketball players are earning, but I'm sure it's a little less than that.
And the only great Nigerian basketball player, Olajuwon, because of the money, went to America, became a U.S. citizen,
exactly.
and played for the U.S.
team.
I
sort of feel, as an immigrant to America myself, I am somewhat focused on the American stories, and they're wonderful ones, aside from Michael Phelps. The story of Gabby Douglas, the 16-year-old African-American who became the gold medalist, all-around gymnast. It's just a wonderful story. Here's this girl from a poor family who just set out to be an Olympian and succeeded. So I am somewhat of a sucker for all these stories.
There's a lot of human stories, isn't there? What about the young Chinese swimmer, Ye Shi-wen? She won 2 gold medals. She broke records, and then everyone, the Americans, implied
that was appalling bad sportsmanship.
Yeah,
appalling
the American coach said it was. Yeah, that's what she said as well. She came back and attacked that.
It was too good to be true, they said.
But this is the sad thing about the Olympics.
Is Phelps winning 20 gold medals? Is that too good to be true too? But no one's ever made that accusation against him. They both have huge hands, both her and Phelps. When you see, I've stood in front of Phelps, and the man's a mutant.
He looks like a canoe.
He's a mutant. He was born to swim, and that's and apparently she was picked out as a young child because of the size of her hands and put into a special training program.
Ah, right. And what's been the highlight for you, Armin?
Well, I actually got into synchronized diving for the first time ever. Yeah, and very sad. I was watching the girls' competition, and later the men's. Very, very sad that the Brits were edged out into 4th place. And of course, Alberto is right. You do always look for your own team, especially as, these economic models show that Britain should not be winning nearly as many medals as the US or China, so you hope they'll be just getting a bit more than
But we're still
they
behind
should.
the French, Armin, and that's what
That's the really terrible thing.
You'll see. France, Britain, and Italy, who have economies of about the same size and populations about the same size, will end up with more or less the same number of medals.
That kind of takes the fun out of it, doesn't it?
It's the way it works. I mean, my highlight have been the for me the highlight's been the British crowd. I think that they've been British supporters have been really great. I mean, they've been really behind their athletes.
You mean the ones
in all
who
the
are in the
events,
seats,
and
not
they've
the
shown
empty seats.
amazingly good humor in those opening days when the British were doing terribly. And I think that I think they've been.
And
To me,
They've
that's
got
the
into the
highlight.
spirit of
And
the
they've
whole
gone to the
event.
spirit, yeah.
Despite all the whinging before the opening ceremonies, they've really thrown
Well, that is the
themselves
national
into
sport.
it. Yeah,
in Britain, of
exactly.
course. But what about the legacy, as they call it? I mean, do cities make money from the Olympics? I mean, because what are they called? The International Association of Sports says that there's not much economic benefit, whether it be Barcelona or Athens or
It doesn't.
Atlanta.
It doesn't have because the Atlanta Olympics were terribly run, so it didn't do Atlanta any good. But I think the Olympics had a great part in putting Barcelona on the map. I mean, Barcelona is definitely now considered one of the world's great cool cities. And I think that was thanks to the Olympics. Now you can't quantify that. You can't come up with the numbers. And if you look at how much they spent and how much they've made from the facilities they built, they lost enormous amounts. But I think it does certainly put Barcelona on the map. I think it's put Sydney. I mean, Sydney didn't need to be put on the map to quite the same degree, but I think it
London
certainly established
doesn't need it.
Sydney. London doesn't need it, but the East End needs it. Mm-hmm. The East End needs it. I'm big on these things.
That is true. It probably will have a big impact on simply the map, the look, the feel of London. And certainly
out.
of the political career of Boris Johnson, one has to imagine.
I wonder if we can have a look at that before we go. Can we have a look at Boris Johnson coming down the tripwire? I want to see it one more time. Oh, there we are. Boris Johnson.
You
This
see,
is
he's
apparently the next Prime Minister of Britain. There we go.
He's a supporter in chief there. He really
The
is.
interesting thing, he asked for a rope at that point when he got stuck, and I'm not sure how a rope would have helped at that point.
I think someone wants a pair of scissors, don't they?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. But thank you very much indeed to Armin Jordan, Alberto Romagnoli, Greg Viscusi, and Vivian Walt as well. Thank you to you for watching. That's it for The World This Week. We'll be back with another debate next week.